Hi guys, Dr. Ken Nordberg again. The other day I was thinking, I talk a lot about my 6 new mature buck effective stand hunting methods. And we haven't gotten into great detail about some of them, and others we have, but I thought I would just take a quick run through a little description about each of those, in case there's any question about it. And they're all found in my new book, of course, my new 10th edition. The only one that I've ever written that has all of those particular hunting methods in it. And so let's go through the list a little bit. But before I do, remember at the end, if you like what you've heard, as I've said before, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I appreciate that. And when you're doing that, give that, that's the red button down at the bottom of the screen, and then that little poke that little button with the thumbs up for me too, will you? Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Now, the 6 methods I've been talking about all this time for, well, not quite a year now, when I started, each one is kind of different. Well, it's very different in some ways. The first one I came up with, which we stumbled across, or I stumbled across, the very first year we started in my new whitetail study area near the Canadian border. And at that time, I decided to call it Portable Stump Hunting. And in this case, in the old days when I first started stand hunting, that was a common term for stand hunters. They were called stump hunters. Well, we sat on logs more than stumps because stumps are uncomfortable to sit on, and they aren't often right where you'd like them to be when you're stand hunting. But we sat on logs most of the time. But this particular stump, it could be moved around. This could be a portable stump, which is my stool, which I carried on my back. And what made that stand hunting really good right from the outset is that it could be moved anywhere at any time. You could, by being able to do that, you could always make sure you were very close to very first tracks made by a buck, if you're a buck hunter, or any other deer, if you don't mind which, whether you take a doe or a buck, but you can always be close to where there's very fresh signs made by a deer, which means one of two things. Either that deer is very near right now, at least walking deer, not bounding or trotting deer, but walking deer. It means that deer is either really close right now, and you're liable to see it soon, or it'll very likely visit the same area the very next time whitetails are active. Like if you find the tracks, like say at noon, well, they'll probably be back there in the evening, and that kind of thing. If you find them in the evening, they'll be back there in the morning. So it means those two things. And what an enormous advantage that is when you're hunting whitetails, whether you're hunting bucks or does. So that was a really good thing to learn. So that was portable stump hunting. The next one was this, what I would call much improved tree stand hunting. The tree stand hunting I teach you is very different from what most tree stand hunters use today. When you hunt the way I teach you, you aren't going to end up in a tree that gives you no more cover for your silhouette than what you might get from a telephone pole, like a lot of hunters do nowadays. They sit there, can't figure out why no bucks showed up today, that kind of thing. So, and then the other thing that's the important feature of that is you'll never end up within easy shooting distance of very fresh signs made by a deer, a buck or a doe, which means that every time you go to a stand site using the techniques I teach you, you can always expect that any minute you're going to see a deer. Sometimes the deer sees you first and you don't see it. That happens. Nothing you can do about that. the older bucks especially are very good at finding you before you find them, so, or see them. So you have to expect that. But your odds will always be very good for taking a deer when you use this kind of a stand hunting method I teach you to use in my book. Now, the third one is what you've heard me talking about. This one is opportunistic stand hunting. And that's the most sophisticated kind of stand hunting I've ever come up with. And we learned a lot of what we do when we use that method from wolves. And they're the masters of deer hunters in North America. And from what we learned from them was really great. I mean, it just improved our odds of taking mature bucks so much. And I've talked about, you know, the benefits of all these methods, like, you know, it's like bragging. I don't mean this brag, but I have to remind you that this is no bunch of goofy ideas. These hunting methods enabled my 3 sons and I to take 101 mature bucks 2.5 years of age or older primarily, since 1990. No, the 4 of us. 101 bucks. And how many people do you know that have ever been able to do that, if any? Well, if you had been doing what we've been doing since 1990, you'd be bragging about that same kind of a record as we've had. And that's pretty good evidence, along with what we learned with all the research we've done to develop these hunting techniques ever since 1960 actually. Well, that's 3 of them. Now, 4th one is a small group hunting method that I named the gentle nudge, because what you actually do in this hunting method is use your own human scent spreading downwind toward deer you know are there, like deer feeding in a feeding area or deer in a bedding area. You're using that, and that scent is spreading out and forming a fence line that's going to make those deer go the other way toward a downwind hunter they can't smell or never heard get to his position on a stand site. A lot of times just next to a major deer trail coming out of the area where those deer are right now. You have to know the deer are there, and there's all kinds of ways I teach you how to determine that in this book. The signs that tell you whether this buck is with a doe and estrus in this feeding area, for example, or in that doe bedding area over there, for example. So lots of good things to learn about that. That, we don't use it often, but when we do, it's particularly deadly. Boy, is that a deadly hunting method. Now, the next hunting method that's listed in here is something I call cover all bases deer hunting. That's a large group hunting method. Let's say you got 6 guys, and you know there's a buck been feeding over in this area over here, or bedding up there, and all this cover all around. Let's get together and put all of us at strategic sites that this buck has been using or traveling on trails, that bedding area, the feeding area, maybe on 2 or 3 sides of that feeding area. Let's do that and get out there while he's there or before he's due to come there and be ready for him. And generally, when that buck walks into that track, he'll find 1 or 2 of the hunters. And that works for you, because once he does that, he figures, whoa, there's the hunter that I've been evading all these days, you know. And that's what I'm past him now. I know where he is. I don't have to worry anymore. So I can go anywhere I want over here. And what often happens then, that buck will show up in front of one of those 6 guys or 4 or whatever he used, acting as if he has no idea that hunter is there, because he's not being as serious about trying to find them during that period of time. So that has turned out to be really deadly for us as well. Great hunting method. one to really keep in mind, a group hunting method. I never heard of that. Well then, you know, it's not a random thing. You have to know where the deer is to make it work. You just don't go out and sit all over and hope it happens. This is done deliberately in a certain way. But you find that all over in this book as well. Now, so that's another, the last one is what I call mile-a-day still hunting, which could also be called mile-a-day stand hunting. Either way. But it is a really good hunting method. My brother and I started using that back in the 1960s. And we did really well with it. We almost always got a deer. But it's something that you do all day. I mean, you start out in the morning and you're planning to go until it gets almost dark in the evening. And you only go a mile. But you're going in a mile where you previously found all kinds of fresh deer signs. There's deer in this square mile here. And if you do it right, you're going to see one or more of them while you're working on this. Now, when Bob and I did it, we had a dual method, two of us working together, parallel. And each move was made at a certain time on our watch. Like 3 o'clock, we're going to move up to stand site. We're working on a string of stand sites. We're going to say 2 o'clock, we're going to move up to stand site number 2, or no, 2 o'clock would be more like stand site number 6, and together. Because when you're working that way, when you do make the move, if you disturb any deer, that deer, if they're not being rushed about it, you know, they're just as likely to go toward the other stand hunter and show up right in front of him while you're on the move, or shortly after you sit down at the next stand site, which isn't too far away. But boy, it's a deadly way to hunt. But one guy can do it. I mean, it's fun to do. I do that once in a while. I really do. And rather than sit in one place half a day at a time, I said, well, today I'm going to do a mile-a-day stand hunt. And everybody knows what I'm going to do. And I say, well, I think I'll go up in the Lonesome Pine area. I'll start on the east end and keep working until I get to that far west end, going into the wind. And I know there's deer in there. Lots of deer. I'm going to see deer there for sure, doing that. Most of the time, it'll be when I'm sitting down. And when I'm sitting down and you're watching into the wind, you know, you're not smelling any deer ahead of you. And that's a fun way to hunt it. So that's another one of those very effective methods for taking mature bucks and other deer. One other method that I didn't mention that we sometimes use, not a lot, we use it though, and that's discussed in this book as well, is using a different way a different method of using doe and estrus lure scent. I don't use it as much as I used to. I couldn't go in the woods without that for many years, starting back about 1985. Before that, it was a buck lure scent made from buck tarsal glands that I used a lot. But back in the 80s, holy man, that was a dynamite way to hunt deer. But nowadays, it's more difficult because today, mature bucks that are 2.5 years of age or older, everywhere in America, there's hardly a deer anywhere, a buck anywhere in America that doesn't know this. Primarily because millions of hunters, maybe 15 million hunters every year have been doing this since the 1985, since the middle 1980s. And any that were vulnerable were killed or, you know, taken, and any that weren't, you didn't see. And nowadays, when a buck smells doe and estrus lure scent, if he smells any human scent accompanying that odor, will have nothing to do with it. And that's hard to do, you know, you put it on, it's going that way, and so is your other scent. And now we know, of course, and bucks know it too, and they react accordingly. They can smell you way up there 16 feet in the tree because your scent spreads vertically and finally hits the ground downwind, as well as horizontally when it leaves the tree. It's not in a one direction flat kind of roof thing. We used to believe that it did, because in the early days, deer just never looked up there even when they did smell you. But it's not that way today. But still, it's still possible to make using that kind of lure scent more effectively. And it's a crosswind, up to say 10 container method of using it, so that the biggest portion of what the bucks smell downwind has no human scent into. Up closer to your stand they can smell, but if they smell way over that way, they come in, they'll march into you. And as I've even recorded on videos many times, including in a 12-hour video series I made quite a few years ago, when a buck would hit a line like that, they would end up going from canister to canister, sniffing that bait coming from each one of them, until they're finally close enough right here. You might not even see it happening on the other end of this line, but pretty soon, here they come along that line, and they get close to you. If they came straight toward you, it wouldn't work. But if they came from over there on that one crosswind setup, they're going to get into that, and if they do, then the odds are very good you're going to get them close to the tree. So that's another way of doing it. That's using doe and S's lure scent, the best way to do it today. And that's discussed in here, so you can look for that as well. But anyway, I don't talking about it a whole much because I feel like, well, I can't get really excited because I am not using it that much myself anymore. But every once in a while, I'll get the idea, I think I'll try that because these guys are over there and I can't get over there myself without spooking deer. I'll use lure scent to pull them over this way using a crosswind setup. And that can work. So anyway, that's in there. So that's what this book is all about. That's probably the most important part of this book. And all those things just had to be there because I wanted this book to be the perfect deer hunting instruction book. I just couldn't write a book without all those wonderful hunting methods being in there. So that's what it's all about. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Okay? So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.